can you still see my screen, the
Yep.
terminal? So I'm just going to clear all this out. And and let me show you this. So if I show,
just for folks running through this script, what's a good use case for when you would want to set up RDS?
So
like if you're going to be doing like data analytics.
Yeah. Or if you have like highly relational data where RDS is not, or excuse me, gosh, I keep getting confused, where Dynamo is not going to be a good use case for like data storage, then yeah, you'd want to set up a SQL database right off the bat. Or heck, if your team is more comfortable using SQL than DynamoDB, you could set up a SQL database.
What are the drawbacks using? I guess maybe this is a bit off topic, but
no, it's
like,
great.
What are the drawbacks using RDS versus Dynamo, in terms of like this setup, this architecture?
Mainly, the main drawback to using RDS instead of DynamoDB is DynamoDB is more tightly integrated into the AppSync and Amplify stack.
Right.
Like that's the main reason. Because like they have like Dynamo streams, which are like triggers, like database triggers. They have basically you do your setup declaratively, like you literally write your schema in GraphQL, and then Amplify creates anything necessary on the Dynamo end, which with RDS you do it the other way around. You set your migrations, you create your tables, and then you tell Amplify to create your GraphQL schema based off of that. So it's just mainly the biggest downside is it's not a first class citizen of the Amplify
Right.
AppSync stack yet. Anyway,
is there a cost difference, Dynamo versus RDS, with this setup?
That's a great question. So they're both on demand, right? The RDS cluster that it sets up is what's called a serverless cluster. So you only get charged for what you use. Same thing with DynamoDB. Now, I don't know offhand which is cheaper, based on like it could be that Dynamo is 0.0001 cents per request and RDS is 0.0002 cents per request.
Right.
I don't know exactly what is cheaper in that regard. And then it also kind of enters in where you can do join queries on a SQL database, which would join into one request as opposed to where you actually have to munge the data on Dynamo, which would be 2 or more requests kind of thing.
So I guess something to think about for folks deciding whether to do RDS versus Dynamo.
But we see, can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so prop swap, it created the directory, and that's what it looks like. You have, like I said, you have the Amplify directory, you have the serverless directory, you have the React Native directory, and you have the React client directory.
I'm just gonna split for a second. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to run the same command. Let me just clear this out. Run the same exact command. We're going to do 2 different things. Remember, I said the email address for each environment has to be unique. So we're going to change this to staging. And then we're going to add, instead of letting Gunnerfy select the default stage, we're going to pass the stage we want to create. So we're just going to run this and kick that off. And you'll see we're working on cleaning this up. You'll see some like fatal errors. They're not really fatal. You can just safely ignore those. But this is going to run through and create the staging environment. And it's exactly the same. So I'm going to go back over to the, README so I can explain some more stuff here. Okay, so we talked about the workflow, now deploying. And we've talked about deploying, right? So because you have to deploy your local changes in order to see them on your local environment. So that we've talked about deploying the back end. But again, after all of the pull requests have been approved, you want to move it to the staging environment and then later probably the production environment. So in that case, in order to deploy the backend, you just do Gunnerfy deploy backend, and again you can pass it the stage option of -s staging. Gunnerfy deploy mobile will deploy the React Native code to Expo, And then finally, Gunnerfy deploy. Gunnerfy
This is why we
deploy
have to call
web.
it goats. I'm telling you.
Yeah, seriously. Gunnerfy deploy web will
To
will
fly to the
fly
fleb.
will deploy the React client to Amplify with a full SSL cert and everything like that. So that's how you deploy at the end of the iteration. You would like run Gunnerfy deploy web dash s, Gunnerfy deploy mobile dash s, Gunnerfy deploy backend dot s as well.
You did it.
I did it. I did it. The
But
last.
for
Go
folks
ahead.
who might be curious, how does Route 53 fit into this in terms of setting up those records? There's nothing integrated into the process here, right?
Correct. Now, you're 100% correct. There is nothing. Nothing is. This script does nothing for Route 53 as is. However, and it's an undocumented feature. The serverless framework, I have a variable called domain name, and by default, it's blank. However, if you put a domain name in there, then serverless will actually create the CloudFront or Route 53 distribution and hosted zone. So by default, it does nothing, and it creates these URLs like this. Like, can you see
Yep.
this?
Yep.
This is how it creates default URLs like this.
Yeah.
And then if you want to add your domain later, then you can add that domain name to serverless, and again, magically it will associate everything with that domain.
Yep.
So the last thing kind of to know here from the README, two things. We put this section here where, like, if you want to really get good with all this stuff, read through these docs. Like, just actually pour through them. The only ones that aren't really necessary that I put in here anyway are these Ramda and
Yeah, I was
RJ
gonna say Ramda.
RxJS docs.
Yeah.
But like, if you were like, I want to go work for Gunner Technology, where do I start? I would point you right here. Like, if you can go through all this stuff and really are familiar with that, then you would have no problem working at Gunner Technology. Here's a weird one, right? Okay, so I want to point out a gotcha, two gotchas. One with DynamoDB, and that's here. And I can't believe that Amplify has not fixed this problem yet. You can only deploy. DynamoDB has this concept called local secondary indexes (LSIs) and global secondary instances (GSIs). You'll see them mentioned all the time.
In
Not so much.
indexes.
What's that?
Global secondary indexes. You said
Yep.
instances.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So not so much LSIs, but GSIs are talked about all the time. And so GSIs are basically like a foreign key. That's basically how it works if you're thinking about
Yep.
SQL. And so in order to actually query in DynamoDB, you have to create GSIs. Like, if you want to get all comments by blog post, you have to create by blog post ID. You have to create a GSI for post ID and associate it with every comment, right? So, but the thing is, DynamoDB will only let you create one GSI per table per time. So, like, let's say you try to add, like, you want to be able to query comments by user and comments by post ID. So you add, if you add that both to your GraphQL schema and hit deploy, it'll bomb.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it only create one at each time. So keep that in mind, because it is kind of nasty if you do it and then you have to undo it. So we wrote this little script where basically you can run this. You can run this script to see if there's any indexes being created. You can run this little script, and if they're all active, you're all good. You can deploy. But again, try to deploy one index at a time. Otherwise, you're going to run into some problems.
And I can't remember if we've actually seen the profile flag before, or if you talked about what the profile is, but in the AWS credentials file, as part of this process, it actually sets up the credentials for the profile that you need to use to actually run that command, or any command for the project you're setting up.
Right. That's exactly right. So profile -- profile basically tells the AWS CLI which account to use.
And you can grab that name, the name of that profile, from ~.aws/credentials.
Yep, that's exactly right. And really, I should make this a lot easier and just add a Gunnerfy command. Like,
yeah, I guess that's true, because we'll have the
then you can have
profile. We'll know what the profile is.
anyway, and the last one is accounts. So the cool thing about this setup is everything is by account. So like, let's say you want to just mess around and create a new test project just to see if this works, kind of thing. All you have to do to make sure you don't get charged any money is close the account. Or in the case of like the prop swap, let's say Anthony leaves the company and we want to shut down his his accounts. So basically all you have to do is close the account. But in order to close the account, you have to go through a number of steps. And then also what you should do is remove the IAM group and IAM policy on the main account. Because those are two things that get created on the root account side. So just to keep those clean, it's not going to hurt anything if you don't remember to delete those, but you should just clean those up just to make sure you don't have any dangling groups or policies in your main account.
I guess especially with the groups, because there's a hard limit to how many groups you can belong to.
Right. Which
of 10.
That's another big gotcha, which I should put in there is so like,
yeah, make sure you don't already have 10 groups assigned to the IAM user you're trying to create the account for.
Right. So, and actually, I was actually talking to AWS about this. I think they're going to actually evaluate it.
Oh, huge.
Like in this case, this prop swap, in this prop swap example that we talked about, the one that we're running through right now. At the end of the day, I'm going to set up 3 environments: Cody, staging, and production. Then I'm going to add dairy as well. But by just me setting up those 3 environments, that creates 3 separate accounts. And again, we use the fine grain access policy. So we're going to have 3 different groups, 1 group for each account. So that's 3 groups that I'm in right there, right off rip. I'm in 3 groups. And that basically means that I'm a third of the way to my limit.
30% of the way to the cap.
Yeah, 30% of the way to the cap. So you can imagine if I'm working on 4 projects, I'm screwed because AWS has a hard cap of 10 groups per user. So keep that in mind. And in that case, what you have to do if you're working on more than 3 projects at once, you basically have to remove yourself from a group and then re-add yourself to the group when you're back on that account. And it's kind of annoying as well.
It might also be good to add to the sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I would say you can skirt that. You can skirt that by using the more open access policy. But basically, if you do it the fine grain way, you're going to be able to work on 3 projects max at a time.
What if you add the groups to like a super group? Like the 3 groups.
So
can you like subsume them under a parent group and still control the access?
Yeah. Well, so what you could do if you wanted to kind of jigger this manually is you could create, like you could create a group called Cody's access group.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then add Cody, obviously, to that group, and then add every account that Cody should have access to that group.
So you'd attach the policies directly to that group, as opposed to okay,
right?
Yeah, I guess that's a workaround. The thing I was going to say, and I don't know if this is 100% accurately the case, but for people who are wanting to mess around with this, new accounts get created in the Amazon free tier, right? There'd be no charges out of the gate for new accounts that you create.
Correct. There's no charges. It's all in the free tier. And actually, everything that's set up is pay per use. So
yeah,
you're in the free tier, but even if you never use it, because the free tier expires after like 6 months or a year or something like that.
Yeah.
Even if you forgot about it, you wouldn't get charged for anything because you only like DynamoDB is per request. RDS is per request. Now, if you put some stuff in S3, you would get charged pennies for it, but that's about the only thing. And same thing with the CloudFront distribution. The CloudFront distribution is per request.
So just in terms of like having to close the account, you don't actually. It's not like spinning up. We were talking about Elasticsearch earlier today. Like if you spin up an Elasticsearch instance, you're getting charged. Like you don't want to just leave that thing running. But this you can just leave running and not have to worry about it, and then close it eventually once you're done.
And that's a good point. It's because Gunnerfy does not create an Elasticsearch service instance. However, the cool thing about Amplify is they have these things called directives. And so if you're creating a model, you say @model, then that lets Amplify know that that's a model. If you want to make that model searchable, you just add a directive searchable.
Mhm.
And when Amplify sees that searchable tag, it will create an Elasticsearch service if one doesn't exist already. At that point that you put it in there, and by the way, by default, Amplify creates the Elasticsearch service in the free tier.
Uh,
But if you were to forget about it after the free tier expired, you'd start getting charged.
right, right, right.
So we're by the way, so that's the complete rock through, and we're now it's setting up the CloudFront distribution right now. So that's what's taking the staging.
For the
Well,
staging environment?
yeah,
Oh, I
exactly.
didn't even see you kick the staging environment off.
Yeah, I did that when you were gone. So the
Oh,
staging
perfect.
environments should be finishing up pretty soon, and then the last thing we'll do here is we'll add you to the account. We'll add you to the project.
What about like future developments for goats, as we're calling it now?
Oh yes. Oh, so that's a good question. So I created it's an open source project, and I just put the issues in here that we want to kind of work on slash fix slash add. Um, so yeah, and I think I need to. I'm going to add this just so I don't forget. Um, add ability to add RDS after project.
uh, those are so far from related.
I know it's yeah, it's so
Beta. You tried.
it tried. It gave it the old beta try. So yeah, that's it. We may change the name of it, like you said. We may change the name of it. Probably should come up with something better. But the overall goal is to try to create like you said, like a Rails on steroids. Which
Yeah.
Rails, the Rails command basically it creates a scaffolding project, and that's basically and database migrations. Not only we're trying to do that with Gunnerfy, but on top of that, we're adding architectural setup, deployments, account management, development workflow. So a lot of people are out there cringing, saying it's like because a lot of people, for example, who like React because it's not opinionated, where
Mhm.
Rails is extraordinarily opinionated. But this Gunnerfy is good for teams that are working on a lot of different projects. Like if you're just you can benefit from Gunnerfy if you're a startup and you're going to be working on one project for the next 5 years. You can still benefit from getting it off the ground, but where this will really shine is if you're setting up new projects like crazy and you need to have it done in a standard way, kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, we talk about standardization a ton, and uh, like back in the biz dev series, we talked about running your company as if you were going to be able to sell it someday. And like one of the big things to be able to sell your company is having the modularity of resources where you can sort of move people around, or if somebody buys your company, they're usually just going to keep a handful of people, if that, and they're going to
Right.
want to plug all of their existing employees into your process. So having this standardized setup where you can just sort of point to the documentation and everything's done a certain way and all projects are started a certain way, set up the exact same way, it just makes it that much easier to roll roll with a ton of different projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so, uh, this is interesting. As I was scrolling through to see if anyone was responding to us on Twitter, um, the talk about Amazon Aurora, the SQL-based database, and so now I guess there's a tutorial. This is interesting about running a massive WordPress network off of a serverless Aurora. So basically, you're not charged unless people are using it, kind of thing, which is crucial for WordPress because like there's so many people with WordPress sites that they have to have it for like small companies, but no one ever
Nobody ever, yeah,
no one
right.
ever goes to them. So you kind of have to have them, but you don't want to be paying for a dedicated database just to be, sitting around doing nothing. So that's interesting.
That is interesting. That'd be huge. Serverless WordPress.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to kind of, again, talk about what we set up. We set up an Expo based React Native client. We set up a React client. We set up AppSync. We set up Amplify. We set up a CDN. We set up user management with Cognito for authorization and user management. We set up a GraphQL API. We set up a DynamoDB database. We set up file storage on S3. And I feel like there's something else that we set up that. We set up analytics tracking with Pinpoint, and
I guess Sentry as well would have been set up as part of this
yeah,
process.
so Sentry for error tracking, and then
Code commit is set up.
yeah, your Git repository, your code commit repository is set up. So you have your Git repo, and then there is some other one that I cannot think of, which drawing a blank on right now. Did I say GraphQL API? I
You
said
said GraphQL API, yeah.
GraphQL API. There's something else that we set up that. Optionally the Route 53 hosted zone.
Right.
For DNS management, and we set up. Not only do we set up the Amplify CLI, but we set up Amplify hosting, which is basically Git deployment and tracking and things like that. So we're
so like a handful of things.
Yeah, we're setting up like 10 to 15 different things very easily here with this. I mean, very easily now. It was hell to get this all working.
Worth it.
But now that we do, it's I'm sure they'll change everything tomorrow. And
that's the way it goes, really.
Oh, side note, as we wait for this to finish, so I was simultaneously like getting really pissed off about the fact that React has introduced hooks, but then I read through it and it's like, that's pretty useful.
It's pretty cool stuff, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's borderline, right? Like it's certainly useful, and it makes some stuff easier, but I'm like, because literally now everyone is so hyped about hooks that they're using it for everything. So someone who's coming to React is not probably going to jump in with hooks right away, because most of the material out there is non-hooks, and then they're going to see all these code libraries that use hooks and not have any idea how they work, kind of thing, which is unfortunate. I don't know.
Can you?
I'm on the fence. I totally see the use for it, and there's some niceties, but it's in no way necessary.
Does it replace Redux?
So it certainly can. They have a hook. So hooks are all. Actually, I have the documents up right now. There's 3 basic hooks, and then 1, 2, 3, 7 advanced hooks. So the basic hooks are use state, use effect, and use context. And one of the 7 advanced hooks is use reducer, which I haven't gotten to, but it looks like it does the same thing as Redux does, because Redux is just again, I'm sure people get mad at me, but to simplify it, it's basically just a reducer framework. So it looks like they've attempted to bake that into React.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read through this. I guess we'll know how useful they are once the hype dies down.
Yep.
See what sticks around. I don't know if it makes sense to run through like the local environment, like everything that you have available locally for folks to see. Maybe like Expo and React Native Client.
I kind of did that when you were gone.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I kind of went through that to show what everything was there.
Should we talk about Star Trek on All Access, CBS All Access?
That's right. Actually,
I was trying to get Frank to talk about that because apparently it's a dumpster fire.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I guess the issue is like old school Star Trek was all about hope and exploration and like boldly going where no man has gone before kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I think I don't even what's it called? Discovery? Star Trek Discovery? I think
Is
is
that,
all about like
is that the one with Scott
war and
Bakula?
misery and huge space battles.
Huh.
And I think that's why Trekkies hate it.
Well, yeah, you know what? It's so weird because I'm such a big dork for like Star Wars stuff like that. I never got into Star Trek, so I'm kind of outside my element here. But
I
it
can
stands
count
to
on
me.
one hand the number of Star Trek episodes I've seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was gonna say like it sounds like they're again kowtowing to this generation that has no patience for like plot development and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's weird because the Family Guy, what's his name? Guy Seth MacFarlane has a
Yep.
show called The Orville
Right.
that I think was originally started as like a parody of Star Trek or not a satire. I guess it just kind of like aped a lot of the Star Trek themes, but with like a cruder humor. And I think it's just morphed into Star Trek at this point. And like people who love Star Trek watch The Orville now. They don't actually watch Star Trek Discovery
Huh. Okay. All right.
because I think The Orville is all about that like the classic Star Trek plotline of we landed on this weird alien planet. They have this weird life philosophy. We have to get them to understand why it's wrong and then leave the planet. I think that's like 90% of Star Trek episodes.
Huh. I mean I love Seth MacFarlane. Even his even that movie that just bombed, that like A Million Ways to
Ted?
Die in the West.
Oh yeah, I never saw that.
Oh, I think it's
Is
I
it funny?
mean, I thought it was pretty funny. Like it bombed pretty hard, but
It's got Liam Neeson, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a look. I think they're releasing another Star Trek with Picard, Jean-Luc Picard
Oh,
from the Next
really?
Generation. I think he's getting a standalone show, like a sequel to Next Generation, like Picard's older days. Which I'm not sure who was clamoring for that, but I think they've stopped making movies at this point, maybe because the third one didn't do very well.
Oh, the one with
Idris Elba.
oh, I was gonna say who's the guy from Heroes? Siler.
Oh yeah. Zachary Quinto.
Yes, yes, yes. Man, we were talking about Game of Thrones and how hard it just tanked and tanked it did. But like
Yeah.
a lesser example of that was Heroes. Like it was so big for like the
Oh
first
yeah,
season, maybe the second, and then it just was awful after
that's
that.
such a good call. Yeah, I didn't. The first season was amazing,
Amazing. Amazing.
and then I think the second season is when Siler became like a good guy. He was like a buddy cop with someone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
It did go off the rails. It's kind of hard to follow that first season up, though. I guess.
Yep.
Um, I don't even remember if I saw the entire show. The last one I remember is took place at some carnival or something.
Well, and then they try to reboot it. They came out a couple years ago with like a reboot.
Did they really?
Yeah, and it
How did I
rebooted.
miss that? Was it terrible?
Yeah, it was a reboot for the ages. I don't know what that means.
Let's see what the episode rankings are. Oh wait, I did see the last season.
Yes, use reducer is a Redux replacement.
Huh. Yeah, Heroes still had good ratings at the end.
What's that?
Heroes still had decent ratings at the end. as this finishes up. I don't think we'll ever see a universally show like Game of Thrones become a universally reviled show
So
like
quickly.
Game of Thrones.
So quickly.
That's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. 4.2 is the rating of the last episode on IMDb out of 10. The finale, I looked it up. The finale of the series finale of Keeping Up with the Kardashians had like a 4.3 rating.
Oh, that's so rough.
They done goofed. Honestly, though, I'm telling you, if they did a sequel series of Game of Thrones in like 10 years, get the same actors back, and basically position it as like bring Daenerys back, have her maybe have her become the Night Queen or something like that, like have Drogon carry her off into the east to be resurrected or something like that, and basically position the season as like the redemption of the dumpster fire of season 8. It would get so many people watching. People are desperate to have these characters redeemed.
Yeah, totally.
So maybe it's just a really smart play on HBO's part.
Yeah, and it was so funny because someone asked like HBO executive or something like that. We're like, so the imagine that the spinoff will involve Arya going off like west of Westeros, and they're like, no. It's like then it would. There's just no reasoning to any of season 8.
No, none.